Hey, welcome to the mission, the fiction mission. Back with a new episode. I've was talking with an online friend. He had a question, a very simple question for me, and instead of giving a simple answer, I started with a lengthy explanation or a lengthy answer, and it really uh, got my brain working and motivated me to kind of put that answer for him in a video form. So this is a video form. By the way, this viewer has a channel called The Curious Gospel of Mark, and he makes pretty cool videos um, along the lines of Dr. Dennis MacDonald doing nemesis criticism or comparing elements in Homer with the gospel narrative. So I'll leave a link on this video to his channel because really he did inspire me to think through all of what I'm about to present here. And this is sort of an answer, maybe a better answer for him, but I think it's a general, valuable general presentation for everyone interested in this subject matter. All right, so first of all, what I'm doing today is what I'm calling uh, a literary inspiration analysis. This analysis requires some historical background as to the Markan priority, the general background of the Judean occupation of Rome, etc. So I want to start this presentation by saying this is more of a literary analysis than a historical analysis. So we're talking about literature, talking about the story of the gospel or the gospel narrative. And so as part of this presentation, I'd like to start out with uh, other examples of literary inspiration that will lead us into the gospels. All right, so the first example I have is that of J.R.R. Tolkien and the whole Lord of the Rings trilogy. Here are a few pictures of J.R.R. Tolkien, and really, um, the idea of this literary analysis is, with every great story, great narrative, there's of course a plot, and but even before the full plot is developed, very often there's an original inspiration. In the case of the Lord of the Rings, for example, it's a very lengthy novels uh, released in three books: The Fellowship of the Ring, The Two Towers, and the last one was called escapes me at the moment. It'll come to me, but and so anyway, you see a very large narrative, and once you finish reading the books or watching the movies, you can see what the original idea of the author was. Even before the full novel was developed, you can see that he had an original idea. The original idea is something like Frodo comes into possession of the ring, and he goes on this amazing journey, and he ultimately must destroy the ring, which would cause his own ruin. So the idea is struggling with power. There are many interpretations you might give to the struggle of power or the corruption of power, and getting rid of those things which would cause your own destruction. So that's something, a quick synopsis of the Lord of the Rings story and narrative. But the key point here that I want to make with this literary analysis is you could see that there was an original idea. Even before the plot was developed, there was an original idea. Okay? And another example would be something like the Star Wars trilogy, which, by the way, is also a trilogy. But, George Lucas famously said he kind of had the idea of having basically the Wild Wild West and shoot ups, etc., but taking place in space. So it is basically cowboys, Wild Wild West type stuff, but in space and on spaceships and space cruisers and TIE fighters and all that kind of stuff. But when you consider the plot, you boil down the plot, you can see that there is after you've seen all the movies, you could see that the idea is about a son struggling against the the power of Darth Vader, of course, who turns out to be his father. So the catch is that the so-called villain, Darth Vader, which Luke was fighting against, was actually his own father. So you can see that that idea developed before, you know, was there before the development of the whole plot or all the subplots, etc. All right, so this is how literary inspiration begins. You begin with the idea, and that idea grows and grows into the story. Now, a similar thing happens in music as well of great songwriting. So I'll give an example here of the Beatles. Right, here's the Beatles, and take a song like "Strawberry Fields Forever," very famous Beatles song by John Lennon, and here you see a lady. She's at the gate of the actual place, which was called Strawberry Fields, and it was the inspiration of the song. So even before the words were written, even before there was a melody or recorded, you know John Lennon was thinking about this place, and this place was the inspiration for the song long before the song came to fruition. So this is very often the case with inspiration for a story, a novel, a movie. There's an original idea, and something similar happens when we analyze the Christian story, the gospel narrative. When you think about the gospel narrative, you can see that there is, if you work back from the plot, you can see that there is an original idea. Or you could think of the first inspiration that the author had for this story. So, for the remainder of this presentation, we're going to focus on the gospel narrative, and we're going to work backwards. Okay, typically, in biblical critical scholarship, we start with the story and we work forward in time through all the variations and the developments that would happen to the story, meaning going from Mark to Matthew and Luke, and into the more complex theology as incorporated into the Gospel of John. But for this presentation, we're just focusing on Mark, and we're going to work backwards from Mark to see what the original idea of the gospel was, or the original idea in the author's mind. And this is a pretty cool technique because it lets you get to the essence of the story. And so let me continue along those lines. All right. So when analyzing the gospel story, this is sort of a two-step process. The first step is to, number one, take the plot, understand what the plot is, and if you strip away all of the things that are extraneous to the plot, in other words, remove things that don't affect the plot. Okay, so we're gonna remove, things that may have theological significance, may have prophetic significance, etc., but don't really affect the plot. So let's think for a moment. What is the core plot of the gospel narrative? So, of course, starting with John the Baptist, the Holy Spirit descends upon Jesus in that scene, and so you have a scene of John the Baptist and the Holy Spirit coming upon Jesus. And so from this point forward, you're kind of supposed to know that Jesus is a divine person or embodies divinity, or Yahweh or God of Israel has come into the world as a person. All right. Secondly, you have the Pharisees, which are a religious elitists. Let's call it that. They are the religious elite. So you have a political party that is in power, that runs the temple, versus the John the Baptist movement, or what you might call the Essenes, um, which are more of the common folk, let's say. All right. Now you have also Jesus, of course, who does represent the divine man, and so he goes about his ministry. He does all these miracles, etc., making it very clear to all the people around him that he is no ordinary man, and that he is divine. Okay. Now the story develops, and he gets into trouble. He gets accused falsely of claiming to be a Messiah, or that charges leveled against him, and he ultimately gets framed by the Pharisees, and he gets executed, gets crucified. Okay. Now, of course, since he is a divine man, you can't really kill God, of course, because God permeates the universe. So, of course, um, he kind of mysteriously gets out of the tomb somehow. All right. So that's the core plot of the gospel narrative. Now, stripping out all the extra stuff, all the prophecies, all the miracles, you get down to that's the uh, core aspect to the plot. Now, the like I said, that's the first step, stripping it down. Now, the next step is to abstract each of those elements, um, abstract them away from how they're known. Okay, so for example, John the Baptist and that movement is extracted to be something of, let's say, a political group of the poor, a party of the common people, people that are striving for righteousness, but are not the wealthy, they're not the elite, they're the common folk. Okay, and of course, the Pharisees uh, are the religious elite, and Jesus is the embodiment of God on earth. And if we are to um, abstract the crucifixion, we could say something like, well, he was executed, or he was persecuted and was killed. All right? So, boiling it down to its bare bones, the gospel story is essentially this: uh, God comes to earth, and among the common folk and the people that should recognize him, instead of recognize him, kill him. The religious elites kill him, but you can't really kill God, so he lives on. Uh, and so you could see that you have two factions. You have two political factions. You have the common folk against the powerful ruling elite that are um, performing sacrifices and holier than thou types, speaking on high, and the ruling class, the religious ruling class. So you could see that there is a very uh, basic struggle between the common folk and the ruling elite. And the people, the religious authorities, the people that are supposed to be closest to God or pretend to be closest to God, uh, don't realize when God comes into the earth and does all these miracles. And ultimately, they uh, betray and frame him and execute God. So you could see that when you boil the gospel narrative down to its essence and abstract it away from the specifics, you have a very, very basic story of God coming into the world, the ruling elite that should have recognized God don't, and they kill God. So you can see from a political perspective, the point of the story is to warn righteous people, the common folk, against the dangers of the religious elite. And that at the core is the essence of the gospel narrative. When you boil it down and abstract it away from the specifics, that is the plot, and that really is the original lesson. Likewise, it's the original idea that was in the author's mind. Now, of course, like the example of Lord of the Rings or Star Wars, there's an original idea. And once you begin to develop that original idea, or what I mean is when the author developed that original idea, he continued to develop it and into the story that we more readily recognize as the gospel story, with specific characters and specific scenes and specific disciples and Peter and Judas and Pilate, with the specific characters, the specific actors that bring the plot together in its fullness. Okay, so that is my 2 cents, a literary analysis of the original inspiration of the author. That is to say, the person commonly called Mark. The author had that very simple story in mind. It's a political story. It's set in time and place. It's relevant to particular political parties at the time in Judea under Roman rule. Okay, so that's the story. That's the context. That's the basic analysis. Now, what is the conclusion? Getting back to the original question that I was posed, it was essentially, what's my view of the historic Jesus? So, along, you could watch many of my videos. I spell it out. I'm trying to not spell it out so blatantly these days, but I'm trying to make videos that inspire people to think about some of these things in a way they may have not thought about it before. And so in this video, I could go on into 2 or 3 parts and continue, but for this video, I'm going to leave it there. And so this is a literary inspiration analysis of the gospel narrative, working backwards into the author's mind to get at the original idea, the original story that was conceived. Now, it will be up to you to consider whether or not this story was inspired by a person or was wholly fictional. But, think of the name of this channel, and my point of view should be clear enough if you could put those 2 dots together. All right. Thanks for listening. This was a fun video, and thanks for the question from the Curious Gospel of Mark, who shall remain nameless. But he's a online friend, and we've had some good interaction. So this video is for him and anyone else who's interested in an alternative understanding of the origin of the Christian religion. All right. Thanks for watching. That's all for today.